10-Minute Jazz Lesson Podcast, episode 133. Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the 10-Minute Jazz Lesson Podcast, episode 133. Hope you guys had a fantastic week. Hope you had a great Thanksgiving. Now it's time to get down to business and let's learn something new today. So before we get into the show, as always, wanted to let you know that you can get all of the PDFs to every single episode we've ever done on our Patreon page. Head over to our website, 10minutejazzlesson.com, click on one of the Patreon links, and you will be able to become a member. Get your hands on all those PDFs and a ton of extras that we do every single month. Now, this community has been growing by leaps and bounds here this week. We've got a whole bunch of new members that I want to give a shout out to, and thank you for becoming members of the 10-Minute Jazz Lesson family on Patreon. Thank you to Joe, Carlos, Rudy, Ting, Jared, Adderall, and Peter. And if I'm butchering any of those names, I'm really sorry, but just goes to show you that we have a truly international community here, and we're just adding people that see all the benefits you get from that particular donation and being a part of that club. So if you're not a member already, it only costs $3 a month. That is less than a cup of coffee. And believe me, you will get a lot more than a cup of coffee's worth of education and worth out of that membership. So head over to the website, click on the Patreon banner, become a member. Thank you so much to everybody that is already doing that. I appreciate it more than you will ever know. All right, let's jump into today's episode. So today we're going to be taking a look at a solo excerpt from one of the greatest saxophone players of our time, Stanley Turrentine. Now, if you don't know about Stanley's career, he had this really kind of broad-reaching approach to music. He was a master of jazz and bebop, but he was also really well known for kind of his playing on the more bluesy side of things. He did a lot of records with Jimmy Smith, did a lot of, kind of organ trio stuff, and was just one of the most versatile players that I can think of. And he also just had this really sweet sound. And his playing was really accessible to a lot of people, whether you were a jazz player, a fan of really hardcore jazz, or just a casual listener of jazz. His music reached kind of all those folks. And there's something to be said for that. And actually, what we're going to be taking a look at today is one of the ways that he did that. He could play something that was relatively simple, but the way that he played it was the thing that got you. And then he could turn around in the next measure and really kind of hit you with a bunch of really intricate bebop lines, something that kind of shows like, hey, don't underestimate me. I know this music better than anybody. And that's one of my favorite things about his playing. So what we're going to be looking at today is an excerpt from one of his solos off of a Jimmy Smith record. And this is over the great tune, The Sunny Side of the Street. One of the best tunes, one of the best standards that I can recall. This is a tune that I play all the time. Now, one thing to note before we actually get into the transcription, they actually play this tune in the key of G when it's traditionally played in the key of C. So if you're looking at your PDF for this week and you're going, hey, those aren't the chords to Sunny Side of the Street, just know that they played it in a completely different key. All right, that's something to just be aware of before we get into this. Now, what we have is we have one 4-bar phrase that shows off Stanley Turrentine's blues playing and his total mastery of that side of the language. And then it's exactly what I was talking about. He turns around in the next 4-bar phrase and he gives us an absolute masterclass on bebop playing. complete with a ton of chromaticism, approach notes, enclosures, all the stuff that we've talked about on this podcast. And it just shows off in a very short excerpt exactly what I was saying about this person. They have the ability to adapt to any situation. And what that does is it gives tremendous variety in their playing and always keeps the listener coming back for more, wanting to hear what this person is going to do next. So let's dive into the PDF and break it down a little bit. The first thing I'm going to do is actually play this for you, just so you can hear what we're talking about before we actually talk about it. So here's the 8-bar excerpt from Stanley Turrentine's solo. And one more time. So you can hear the drastic difference between the first 4 bars and the second 4 bars, and I'm sure you can hear actually how effective it is. So let's dive into it a little bit. What this is the last 4 bars before the bridge, and then the first 4 bars of the bridge. So it makes sense to kind of change what you're playing because the section of the tune is changing, and the most striking part of the tune is coming up, which is the bridge. So that in itself is a lesson right there on solo pacing, solo structure, things like that. But let's dive into the actual harmonic material. So what he's doing over the first part of it is he's like straight up using the blues scale, especially in the last 2 bars. Now, if you're not familiar with this tune, what it is, the last 2 bars of the second A section are a 2-5-1 into the key of G in this case. So this is actually a really cool device that you can use. You can completely ignore the 2-5-1 and just play a blues scale over the 1 chord. So that's what he's doing right here. He's using a G concert blues scale, and instead of playing weaving himself in and out of the 2-5-1 and playing some kind of, really complicated device, he's just really, bringing that blues effect to the forefront and just relying and leaning heavily on that. Now, people like him, people like Sonny Stitt, Charlie Parker did a little bit, not as much. A lot of players out there will do this sometimes. Even like the most hardcore bebop players will infuse some of that blues feeling into their solos because it just sounds good and it's really, really swinging. So that's what he's doing. He's really ignoring the 2-5-1 and instead playing some blues stuff in a very masterful way. Now, the next measures are completely different. He's playing 100% through the changes in these 2 measures. And basically what this is like a 2-5-1 to the key of C concert, which is what happens at the beginning of the bridge, right? And I think in this case on this record, they were just playing a big 2-measure 5 chord into 1. But anyways, they're almost kind of the same thing. Now, I'm not going to take the time to really dissect every single part of this second 4 measures because I want you to do some of the work on your own. So what I want you to do is I want you to go through the next 4 bars and I want you to find every chord tone, and then I want you to notice all of the chromatic notes around those chord tones and figure out some of the devices that he's using. I'll give you a couple of hints. He's using a lot of approach tones to these chord tones. And that's what's giving it that bebop sound, that chromatic sound, is simply the fact that he's using a lot of chromatic notes. There's also a couple of spots where he uses some enclosures, And then there's a couple of spots where he actually uses double chromatic approach tones to chord tones. So it's like chock full of a lot of the stuff that we've been talking about over the past couple of months, a lot of the issues that we address in our Chromatic Way ebook. All that kind of stuff is in here, in action, in real life, just to kind of show you that that stuff actually does apply. But I want you to do a little bit of analysis yourself. Now, I'm sure you could tell just by listening to it one time that it is very chromatic and it is very bebop forward. But get in there, do the nitty-gritty analysis yourself, take some notes, and maybe start working on some of that stuff. But really, the whole point of this episode is to notice the dichotomy between the first 4 bars and the second 4 bars, and then realize that these are all in the same solo in the span of about 30 seconds. I'm going to play that excerpt one more time, and then we're going to say goodbye for this week. Now, obviously, I can't hold a candle to the way that Stanley Turrentine actually plays it, so go and check him out. I can't put those recordings on the podcast or I get into a lot of trouble, so you have to suffer through my playing. But go and check out the whole record. It's really awesome. Back at the Chicken Shack. All right? So send me any questions that you may have. I get really pumped up when I'm transcribing something like this and I come across something that can be so educational and so enlightening. As you could probably tell, I'm pretty excited about finding this and being able to present it to you. So make sure that you do something with it. Turn it into some kind of lesson that you can use in your practicing. See if you can make this dichotomy in your playing. See if you can start using the blues scale effectively over a tune that is traditionally played in a bebop way. Start to feel your way out for that stuff, and your playing will improve a lot. Okay? Have a great weekend, everybody, and we'll talk to you next week with some brand new episodes. Bye.